All right, so today we're going to talk about our political beginnings. And I first want to say that it's important that you understand that the American system of government did not suddenly spring into being with the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776, nor was it suddenly created by the framers of the Constitution in 1787. It actually starts with 13 colonies, okay? And we had many different groups of people immigrate to this area, the 13 colonies. We had the French, the Dutch, the Spanish, the Swedes, and then the English. And the English soon controlled the 13 colonies. And as they traveled from Britain to this newfound land, they brought with them knowledge of a political system with established laws, customs, practices, and institutions that had been developing for centuries. And so in this set of notes, we are really going to focus in on some of those concepts, those basic concepts of government, and where they originated from. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some of the landmark English documents that really contributed or influenced our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and essentially our system of government. Okay, so wary of King John's military campaigns, heavy taxes, the barons, okay, and by barons they just mean lord or nobleman, developed the Magna Carta. They were seeking to protect against heavy-handed and arbitrary acts of the king. Arbitrary just meaning impulses. And essentially with the Magna Carta, again, signed by King John, this forced the English king to give people the following rights. Because, again, he was not doing that. First, trial by jury and due process of law. And then second, protection against the arbitrary taking of life, liberty, or property. So again, arbitrary meaning impulse, just doing it at whim. The Magna Carta established the principle that the power of the monarchy was not absolute, and that they did have to give people certain rights. All right, petition of right. This limited the king's power. It stated that the king may no longer imprison or otherwise punish any person, but by lawful judgment of his peers. Also that the king may not impose martial law, rule by the military in times of peace, or require homeowners to shelter the king's troops without their consent, and no money, tax, or loan without consent of Parliament. Petition challenged the idea of the divine right of kings, declaring that even a monarch must obey the law of the land. So kings, under this petition of right, a lot of times they viewed themselves as the divine right, meaning that God had chosen them to be a ruler, and so it was their divine right to essentially have absolute power or act as monarch. And this petition of right kind of counteracted that and limited his power, ensured that he couldn't just punish whoever he wanted without them being judged by their peers, could not rule by force, could not force people to house troops, and again could not tax or loan, essentially had no access to money without the consent of Parliament first. He couldn't just spend money on whatever he wanted to spend money on. Bill of Rights. This was intended to prevent the abuse of power from current and future monarchs. Parliament, in 1689, created a list of provisions that monarchs had to agree to. This document was called the English Bill of Rights and stated that a standing army in peacetime was prohibited, all parliamentary elections be free, Parliament must grant permission for the Crown to spend money, and right to free trial, freedom of excessive bail, and from cruel and unusual punishment. And I'm sure you recognize some of those elements, especially the freedom of excessive bail and from cruel and unusual punishment. Those are elements that we actually have in our Bill of Rights. Also, it's just important that you understand that our nation was built on, changed, and added to various ideas and institutions that settlers brought here from England. Still, much in American government and politics today is based on these early English ideas. All right, so the English colonies, or the American colonies. Each colony was established on a basis of a charter, which was just a written grant of authority from the king. And there were 3 types of colonies: royal, proprietary, and charter. Royal colonies, there were 8 total: New Hampshire, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. King named the governor, or the chief executive, subject to direct control of the crown. And then the governor's council, which was named by the king, served as an advisory body to the royal governor and became the upper house of the colonial legislature. It was also the highest court in the colony. The lower house, which was bicameral, which just means 2 houses, was elected by those property owners qualified to vote. Okay. The governor, addressed by the council, appointed the judges for the colony's courts also. Both the governor's council and the lower house had the power to tax and spend. Proprietary colonies. Proprietary colonies were Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. These colonies were organized by a proprietor, or a person to whom the king had made a grant of land. The proprietor appointed the governor, and legislators were created. And the governor, once appointed, ran the government, very similar to the way royal colonies did. In Maryland and Delaware, the legislatures were bicameral, or 2 houses, and in Pennsylvania, the legislators were unicameral, which just means 1 body house. Charter colonies. The charter colonies were Connecticut and Rhode Island. They were based on charters granted in 1662 and 1663, and were largely self-governing. Governors were elected each year by the white male property owners. While the king's permission for the governor was required, it often wasn't asked. Laws were made in their bicameral legislatures and were not subject to veto or subject to the crown's approval. Judges were appointed by the legislature, but appeals could be taken to the king. Alright, this video here will just give you a little bit more information about the different types of colonies.